Why does everybody talk about ROAS and MER? What are they and what are they all about? We're going to talk about that in today's video. Okay, so before we get into the differences between the two, let's define what each one is and where it's used in digital marketing today in 2025. So ROAS and MER are both just simple calculations. ROAS, a large big picture standpoint, is an individual campaign's return on ad spend, whereas MER is a more global view of how all of your marketing is working. So let's look at the math behind each one of these acronyms and determine how you should be using it in your marketing today. So ROAS is a simple calculation. It equals your total campaign revenue divided by your total campaign spend. Just that simple. ROAS in most cases is just a moment in time. So let's say you spent $6,000 on some ads, and your revenue for that moment in time, let's just do some easy math, was $12,000 in revenue. Your ROAS, therefore, is 12,000 divided by 6,000, and that would equal a 2 ROAS. Otherwise known as, this is a 2-to-1 ratio. You can also say this is 200% ROAS. That's really more of an ROI statistic. We really look at it as just a hard number. For every $1 you spend, you're getting $2 in return. If you're selling a product at a 50% profit margin, you're all things being equal, without your cost of goods sold, or without your operating expenses and your other expenses, you're basically breaking even on that. It's probably not a great return. The problem is that inside the individual ad platforms, these numbers are usually skewed, and that's the problem with looking inside an ad account, is that you see this as a percentage oftentimes, and it gives you a false sense of security. Because oftentimes when you are spending in Meta, in Google, especially if you're spending on sort of Advantage Plus campaigns inside Meta, or you're using Performance Max inside Google, Google and Meta are targeting repeat customers. So you're actually not really getting any new customers. You're buying continuously the customers that you've already bought before. So that's the way that the algorithms, that's the way that the platforms work. They want to make themselves look good. Like if you're an agency owner, you probably want to make yourself look good in front of your client, but that doesn't help the business at all. So we take ROAS inside ad platforms, with a grain of salt, sort of. It's a good snapshot in time. It's not the thing that we really look at. However, if you have a highly accurate attribution tool like we do with Tier 11 Data Suite, you don't need to rely on those in-app metrics. You can just look into Data Suite. At the end of the day, nobody really cares how much Facebook or Meta or Google is telling you how much you're making on your campaigns. Your source of truth, which is your CRM or the back end of, and we're just going to use Shopify as an example here, that is your source of truth. That's the thing that actually relates back to this thing, which is how much more money do you have in your bank account? That's what really matters. Because if you are overly reliant upon the numbers that you see inside Meta and Google, you might find that you have less and less of these, even though your ROAS might look great. And that's really the travesty right now. And the real challenge for a lot of digital marketers is, how do I sift through all of this? Well, in frustration with ROAS, and when tracking sort of went sideways in 2021, especially with the iOS 14 update, in 2021 and into 2022, ROAS just kind of went out the window. It lost a lot of its luster. Look back 7-8 years, ROAS inside Facebook specifically, or now Meta, was really very accurate because there was no blockers. There was no ATT privacy prompts. There was no cookie blockers. There were less ad blockers. You were actually getting fairly accurate data inside that platform. Same goes to be true with Google as well. So take what you see inside the campaigns and inside the ad platforms with a grain of salt here, and mix that with an overarching metric that we tend to use more often. And if you don't have a tool like Tier 11 Data Suite, then what you really need to do is look at your MER. So let's get into what MER is next. All right, unlike ROAS, MER is a longer view. It's a broader view of how all of your marketing efforts are actually working together. And media efficiency ratio, marketing efficiency ratio, they're used interchangeably. So let's make that distinction just up front. So when you think of MER, before we get into the calculation, you have to determine what you're actually using to determine what this acronym actually means. So if you have a heavy advertising budget, for example, and a large portion of your marketing goes towards advertising, I would look at this as media efficiency ratio, okay? However, if you are very much reliant upon content marketing, for example, social media marketing, you don't really have much in the way of ad spend, or maybe you're considering adding ad spend into your marketing mix, you might want to look at this as marketing. Okay. Now, when I say media, we're thinking about like the actual ad dollars. Okay. The ad dollars itself, and that is typically what we refer to as media efficiency ratio. Just ads, just the ad spend. And maybe you might throw in your agency fees in there specifically. When I think about MER, I think about it as marketing. The way that I determine it inside our business as an agency is I add in all of the costs that I have for my entire marketing staff, plus all my ads. Even though we're a paid marketing company, a paid advertising company that specializes in e-commerce and beauty and wellness in particular, I add all of those costs in together. So that might be, marketing payroll costs, of course, maybe our social media marketing people who do our content. Okay, all of these are salaries. These aren't necessarily ad spend, and our ad spend dollars are actually, very little. Whereas if you have a lot of reliance on advertising, we've used this example in numerous videos in this series here. You have a $10 million client. They spend the large portion of their marketing on paid advertising, upwards of a quarter of what their overall revenue is. So they use media efficiency ratio as their guiding light as opposed to marketing efficiency ratio. So there are two different types here. So just look at your business and determine, okay, am I ad heavy? Maybe I use media efficiency ratio. If I'm more content marketing, individual social media management, maybe email, things that are non-paid advertising, you might want to consider your MER being marketing. So for today's purposes, we're really going to focus on this one, this part of MER, which is media efficiency ratio, and in particular, advertising spend. So let's get into that. All right, once again, a lot of marketing comes down to math, ladies and gentlemen, but not hard math. I did not do well in college in math. My business analytics class, I almost flunked out of. Don't tell my son, who's still in college. Anyway, the point is we're going to talk today about media efficiency ratio. So this, once again, this is a simple calculation. So it's your total revenue. And some people might say total marketing revenue. If you are heavy on advertising, it's going to be your total revenue. Let's say in our case for that beauty and wellness brand that we've talked about many times in these videos here, they're a $10 million business. They spend a couple $100,000 a month each year. So they're 25% of their total revenue is spent on advertising. And in the case of us, like agency fees in addition to that. So 25%. So obviously media efficiency ratio is a really important metric for them. So all you do is you take your total revenue, or you might, your total marketing revenue. If you can stratify it out to just your paid advertising, if you do want to, you can do a hybrid of this too. So there's a lot of sort of variations here, but anyway, let's just keep things simple. It's basically your total marketing spend. So let's say total, in this case, ad spend, because we're going sort of very media efficiency ratio. And it's total revenue divided by a total ad spend. MER is a much more global metric that you want to keep an eye on. So let's use this as an example. We'll use the example of the beauty brand that we've been talking about. Their revenue, is about $10 million a year. Easy for me to write, a lot of zeros. And all we do to get their MER is we divide it by their total ad spend. And I would encourage you, like I said, include in your agency fee with this too, especially if you're on a performance basis or you're paying by ad spend. The agency fee increases as you spend more, which is not a model I recommend, by the way. I think that's really an outdated model. We don't use it for any new customers anymore because it doesn't matter. And we found that it leads to a lot of fractured relationships with our clients. So that does not fluctuate. You can almost look at it in that way as like an operating expense. So if you're not familiar with the difference between a cost of goods sold and your operating expense, we'll leave some links in the videos here to make sure that you do understand that. So in their case, they spend about, let's say it is, I believe it's about 2.4, but let's just say it's about $2.5 million per year that they spend on advertising and media in general. They also have, some staff, they have some OpEx. So you sort of lump that into their operating expenses so they understand their numbers. The key is understanding your numbers. So if we do the quick math here, for those of you who are really smart, your media efficiency ratio, who knows it, is a 4. So MER is measured as a number as well. Like we said before, ROAS oftentimes is a percentage. It might be a ratio 2-to-1. MER is, in this case, a 4. So they know, generally speaking, that if they're spending this amount and making this amount from their marketing efforts, a 4 MER is very healthy for them. However, if all of a sudden revenue declines and we're looking at maybe 7.5 million, and you're dividing that by 2.5 million, okay? Basic math again, you've got a 3 MER. We know for a fact that a 3 MER, it's not a very good 3, however, that's actually off screen a little bit. So we'll make sure we can actually see it. So there's the 3 right there. We know that a 3 MER for this client is not good. So that means that obviously this is the type of thing where you have to look at this very, very carefully and say, all right, there's something going on here. Maybe there's operational efficiencies that they can make. Maybe they're in a contracting market. Maybe, their agency isn't doing all that great of a job. The point is that the MER really gives you a global look at the entire business. Now, you can also do this by quarter. We just did this by 12-month increments. You can do it by 30-day over 30-day average. Inside the Tier 11 data suite, you can actually look at this 30 days and then compare it to the previous 30 days, past 6 months, compared to the 6 months before that. Point is it gives you much more of a global understanding. You can break this down to individual campaigns too. So there is that part to MER, but MER is really looked at like, how are all of my channels, how is all of my marketing working in order to get me to my big goal? Now, MER is also referred to as another name, which is called blended ROAS. Blended ROAS is oftentimes the same thing. People refer to these things as the same. Okay? Blended ROAS is basically all my channels together and how they work together in order to grow my business. So those are the two big differences between ROAS and MER. ROAS is typically as a shorter term, individual campaign, individual channel. Okay, ROAS can be very easily measured, not in the platforms. The best way to do it is actually stratify it out by platform itself. Tier 11 Data Suite does that seamlessly, so we can really get a good visibility. What's Meta doing for ROAS and actual clicks and purchases? What's Google doing? First click, last click. So each individual channel can be looked at by ROAS, breaking it down to individual campaign level. And those numbers are oftentimes very, very different than what we see inside the campaigns inside the ad platforms themselves. So if you can break this down through your back end, which is really is your CRM or your Shopify store, wherever your source of truth is, and try and break it down by individual channel, that's the best way to look at ROAS. However, MER is the way that you're really going to be able to determine the health of the business. And if you know what that number is, like in our beauty and wellness business, they know a 4 is very healthy. If any of these terms aren't familiar to you, make sure that you do download the Marketing Performance Indicator cheat sheet over at tier11.com/MPI. So if you like this video, make sure that you leave a comment below. Make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any videos just like this. And we're going to get deeper into MER and ROAS and how you use it in individual campaigns, and also how to use MER in particular, how to scale and grow your business using accurate data so that you can scale profitably with metrics that matter and growth that scales. Until the next video, we'll talk to you then.